Hello everyone, welcome to the Wuxia audiobook. Today, we will continue to the next part of the series Renegade Immortal.
Chapter 26, Malicious Thoughts. While thinking about the three techniques, Wang Lin became excited. In an attempt to produce the fireball technique, he formed the seal with his hand. However, forget about fire, not even a spark appeared. After a long time, he frowned and tried again. Time and time again, he was ultimately met with failure. He only managed to produce a spark one time. Wang Lin laughed bitterly. Talent, it's always talent. He then practiced the earth-splitting technique on a nearby rock. Although their results were better than what he achieved while attempting the fireball technique, the crack was only the size of his pinky finger. This kind of technique was good for tricking mortals, but in a real battle, they were useless. Finally, he practiced the attraction force technique. He was still not satisfied with the result. But considering that the success rate of the attraction force technique was the highest, Wang Lin put all his effort into practicing attraction force. To put it simply, attraction force was really just controlling objects from a distance. If one could control attraction force well, and has reached the second layer of chi condensation, they could practice the repelling technique. After one broke through the third layer and went into the fourth layer, they could go to the sword spirit house to select a flying sword. After practicing for a long time, Wang Lin started to head home before it got dark. Now that he had reached the first layer of chi condensation, his eyesight and hearing had improved greatly. After entering through the east gate, he heard some familiar voices as he passed by the Chor house. "Brother Lu, when you first arranged for me to gather firewood, you said 100 pounds was enough to finish the task. Why is it 1,000 pounds now? I, Jiang Hu, am not new, and over these past few years I have done much to please you. Do you really want to force me out of the sect? Jiang Hu, don't say that I'm making this hard on you. It is almost the end of the year, and even your brother here hasn't had a good time. But you, instead of working, have come here to give me a sob story. When I brought the firewood that you gathered to the pill house, I was scolded. I took them back and checked them. You little bastard, you really are smart. In the 100 pounds of wood, there was at least 30 pounds of water." Jiang Hu was furious. He loudly said, "Not possible. You're falsely accusing me. Wasn't it because a few days ago, I saw Zhao Fugui give you an immortal talisman so you could pick an easier task for him? What's the big deal? Among the honorary disciples, who doesn't know how you act? As for trying to force me off the Heng Yue sect, you really effed up, you bastard. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to tell the elders. Jiang Hu, you forced me to do this. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for being unlucky to have seen something you shouldn't have. Jiang Hu, stay here. If the elders know of this, your entire family could die with you." Disciple Lu's cold voice came out of the room and Jiang Hu let out a scream. After hearing it, Wang Lin was surprised and kicked open the door. Wang Lin first saw the youth named Lu's hideous face. He was in the middle of thrusting a dagger toward Jiang Hu, who had a frightened expression and whose body was against the wall. Wang Lin saw that he didn't have enough time to help Jiang Hu. He quickly started to use the attraction force technique. Luckily, it was successful this time. An invisible hand held down the attacker. However, the dagger had already cut Jiang Hu's chest. Blood poured out from the wound. The youth named Lu was extremely frightened. His whole body felt powerless as an invisible force held his body, preventing the dagger from being pushed down anymore. Jiang Hu's face was pale. Sweat filled his forehead. He looked at Wang Lin and quickly crawled to the side. The youth named Lu was shocked, and immediately started to struggle. Wang Lin's forehead started to sweat hard, as if he was starting to lose control. This was the first time Wang Lin used the technique on a person. Obviously, he couldn't control it well. Adding on to that, the person was struggling, so he had difficulty maintaining control. Wang Lin's body trembled. Seeing that Jiang Hu wasn't in danger anymore, he relaxed a bit and the attraction force technique also loosened up. Seeing that Lu was about to struggle free, Jiang Hu revealed a strange expression. He looked at Wang Lin, then at Brother Lu. His expression turned ruthless. He picked up a wood-cutting axe and walked toward Brother Lu. Brother Lu's face filled with fear and he struggled harder. Jiang Hu gritted his teeth and muttered to himself, Not a man without poison. Brother Lu, you forced me to do this? You wanted to kill my whole family? Jiang Hu, what are you going to do? Wang Lin was surprised, and the attraction force technique lost its effect. The moment the youth named Lu regained control of his body, Jiang Hu slammed down the axe toward Brother Lu's head. Brother Lu was too late to dodge. A sound like that of a watermelon being broken momentarily filled the room. Brother Lu's body twitched on the ground before it stopped moving. The axe in Jiang Hu's hand fell to the ground. He looked at the bloody corpse with a complex expression. Wang Lin was stunned. That was the first time he had seen such a bloody scene. After a long time, he bitterly started to ask, Jiang Hu, you? Jiang Hu looked up at Wang Lin. His face looked distorted, revealing a grim look. He said, word for word, Wang Lin, you saw as well. I didn't want to kill him. If it wasn't for you, I would have been killed by him. He forced me to do all that, he forced me. Wang Lin remained silent. He hadn't expected his to happen. Jiang Hu took a deep breath. His face revealed a determined expression. He walked next to the corpse and searched it for a while. He took out a bag of holding containing hundreds of the talismans that honorary disciples used to visit their families. In addition to those, there was a thread-bound booklet. Jiang Hu glanced through the book and put it away in his clothes. Afterward he searched the room. He eventually found a secret compartment under the bed. Inside it was a piece of yellow paper. Pondering a little, he turned toward Wang Lin and said, Wang Lin, today you saved me. I, Jiang Hu, will always remember this. As for the Heng Yue sect, I won't be able to stay any longer. When the sect finds disciple Lu's body, they will investigate and find me in the end. I'm going to take these things. As for this disaster-causing immortal talisman, it must be a treasure, or else this youth named Lu wouldn't have tried to kill me. With that, he handed the yellow paper to Wang Lin. Wang Lin didn't take it. He let out a sigh and bitterly smiled. Why must you do this? If you hadn't killed him. Jiang Hu frowned. He said, Wang Lin, don't talk about this anymore. I have suffered enough in these past few years. If you still consider me a friend, take this immortal talisman. Wang Lin bitterly took the talisman. He didn't say any more. Wang Lin, I'm going to leave. This has nothing to do with you. If the sect investigates, they will only find me. By then, I will have already left the Heng Yue sect. Humph, the country of Zhao is very large. I don't believe I'll be an honorary disciple my whole life. Jiang Hu's expression was complex. After a long time, he slowly turned and left the room. Chapter 27, Visit. Wang Lin stared at the spot Jiang Hu had just been standing in. After a long time, he let out a sigh while holding the yellow paper in his hand. After coming to the Heng Yue sect, Jiang Hu was his first friend, but now this happened. This immortal talisman is the cause of this disaster. Wang Lin stared at the talisman. His eyes suddenly changed as he noticed what was different about it. Although this yellow talisman looked just like the talismans disciples get when they go to visit their families, the amount of spiritual energy in it was much higher than the other ones. In addition, there was a sense of danger coming from the talisman. Wang Lin was surprised. Although he didn't know what it was, he knew that it was a treasure. Hesitating slightly, Wang Lin put away the yellow paper. Looking at the corpse on the ground, he let out a sigh. If this corpse wasn't taken care of, with Jiang Hu's speed, he wouldn't be able to escape the sect. Luckily, there was enough room in the bag of holding to hold the corpse. Wang Lin then organized the room and wiped away the blood. He quietly went into the mountain and disposed of the body, then carefully made his way back to his room. After lamenting about what happened, he decided to not think about Jiang Hu anymore. He took out the immortal talisman and began to study it. On the first look, the talisman looked exactly like the ones disciples used when visiting home, but upon closer inspection, one could tell from the material and the ink that it was vastly superior than the talismans disciples used to go home. Wang Lin squeezed the immortal talisman. He pondered a little. He wasn't sure of the exact usage of this talisman. Since the day that he had almost died from drinking the dew, he had been very careful about things belonging to immortals. He didn't dare to carelessly use them. Plus, the characters on the talisman revealed a hint of danger, causing him to be even more cautious. After hesitating for a bit, he put away the talisman. He decided to study it later. After doing all of this, he took out the mysterious bead and entered the dream space. This time, he didn't focus all his time on cultivation, but spent some learning the attraction force technique. He felt that the attraction force technique was very useful after using it on Brother Lu. That was why he was so determined to practice it. He first used the gourd as a target. He tried using the attraction force to grab the gourd. After numerous tries, he finally succeeded. He immediately stopped using the attraction force and started from the beginning. Wang Lin's thought process was very simple. He felt that he must be able to freely use the attraction force. If he tried to use it 10 times, it must succeed 10 times, or else, no matter how strong it was, it couldn't be used in key moment. He calculated a bit. Given his current condition, he could succeed 3 out of 10 times. With only 4 successes so far, it was far from measuring up to his own standards. The time spent in the dream flew by. Without Wang Lin realizing, the feeling of being torn apart came. After coming back to reality, he wasted no time at all. As he opened his eyes, he drank more spring water and started to cultivate. When there was sufficient spiritual energy in his body, he took a deep breath as the contents of the 3 stages of qi condensation appeared in his head. Aside from the laws for each of the 3 stages of qi condensation, there were also 2 very important chants. These chants were the real core of qi condensation. There were 15 layers of qi condensation. Aside from the first layer, which one could obtain by themselves, all the other 14 layers required a chant to enter the next layer. For example, if he had already completed the first layer, and even mastered the second layer's cultivation method, he could only stay in the first layer if he didn't succeed the second layer's chant. Wang Lin muttered the chant in his mind. The spiritual energy in his body started to change. At first, the change was small, but soon, it felt like boiling water was flowing through his body. It seemed that there wasn't enough spiritual energy as it intermittently spread throughout his body, causing soreness, numbness, itchiness, pain, and the like all over his body. He also had an illusion that his body was full of holes. All of this was caused by the spiritual energy. There was a very prominent line in 3 stages of qi condensation. The opening chant for each layer won't always succeed. Talent, spiritual energy, and chants all played key roles. Some people would be able to succeed in 1 try, while some people would need 10 or hundreds of tries. After a long time, the feeling in his body slowly dissipated. Wang Lin was covered in sweat, and the spiritual energy in his body was all gone. But Wang Lin knew from the book that the lack of spiritual energy was only temporary and would recover after meditating for a while. He failed to open the second layer, but Wang Lin was not discouraged. This time, he was just testing it out. It just showed that he didn't have enough spiritual energy at that moment to enter the second layer. After all, he had just achieved the first layer. There was no rush. He still had the spring water with him, so he could just cultivate until he reached the limit of the first layer before attempting to reach the second layer again. That would increase his chances greatly. With this plan, Wang Lin started to cultivate night and day. The spiritual energy in his body started to slowly accumulate, and his mastery of the attraction force technique also increased. He tried the chant for the second layer many times, but all of them ended in failure. In reality, half a month had passed, but 3 months had passed in the dream space. Today, Wang Lin was cultivating, waiting for the time to enter the dream space again. He saw that it was still early. He hesitated for a bit, then started the chant for the second layer to experience it again. He couldn't even remember how many times he had experienced it. Every time, it ended with him being worn out and all the spiritual energy in his body gone without success. 2 hours later, Wang Lin raised his head. He was worn out again, and all his spiritual energy was gone from his body. He muttered to himself with a wry smile, failed again. Entering the second layer is too hard. Suddenly, his eyes darted toward the door. A cold voice came through the door. "Apprentice Brother Wang, come out to see me." The voice sounded familiar. Wang Lin got up and opened the door to see a 27 or 28-year-old youth in black standing outside with a cold air about him. Black clothes. Wang Lin's heart tightened. he recognized that he was the same person that brought him, Wang Qiwo, and Wang Hao to the Heng Yue sect, and also the person who brought his father to find him near the cliff. But Wang Lin remembered that he was wearing white clothes back then. Now, after a few short months, he had risen up to black clothes. He suddenly remembered the day when they were testing at the foot of the mountain. The person who took Wang Hao as a helper said that the man in front of Wang Lin now had reached a critical point in their cultivation, and took over as the examiner to avoid distracting him. Chapter 28, Chores. Among purple, black, white, and red, black represented a really high cultivation. Wang Lin couldn't see through his cultivation, so he respectfully said, "Wang Lin greets Brother Zhang. Congratulations to senior on reaching black clothes." The black-clad youth looked at Wang Lin and slowly said, "Me successfully breaking into the 5th layer of qi condensation does relate a bit to you. If I hadn't found that cave while looking for you, I wouldn't have broken through so quickly." Wang Lin was stunned and asked, "Brother Zhang, that hole with the suction force in the cave could help cultivation?" The black-clad youth nodded and said, "When you reach the peak of the 4th layer and need to use the chant to enter the 5th layer, go there yourself and you will see the effect." He glanced at Wang Lin and said, "Brother Wang, it can't be helped since your talent is mediocre, but since you are a disciple now, you must cultivate diligently. I see that you have no spiritual energy in you at all. You haven't even reached the 1st layer of qi condensation. I'm afraid that out of all the inner disciples, you are the only one." Wang Lin was stunned but wryly smiled. "I'll take apprentice brother's advice to heart. I will double my effort in cultivation." He suddenly changed the subject and asked, "Brother Zhang, what is the reason you're here today?" The black-clad youth chuckled and said, "It's nothing serious. The honorary disciple in charge of the chore house disappeared. Someone saw you go there that day, so I came here to ask you about it." Wang Lin's expression remained normal and laughed, "I have an inkling of what happened. Normally, I don't go near the chore house, but half a month ago, I passed by it and an honorary disciple was talking behind my back, so I taught him a lesson. Maybe he got scared of me and left the sect." Brother Zhang nodded his head, half laughing. He looked at Wang Lin and said, "A disgusting honorary disciple is not important. Today, I came to you because the elders have decided that an honorary disciple shouldn't be in charge of the chore house, so they wanted an inner disciple to take over. But no inner disciple wants to go. They are all busy cultivating." Wang Lin wryly smiled, "I understand. It seems the task has been assigned to me." Brother Zhang smiled slightly and said, "Pack your things and head there today. Right now, the chore house is really messy. You have to get it back in order." He clasped his hands at Wang Lin, took a step, and a sword appeared under his feet. The sword emitted rainbow colors as he rode it away. Wang Lin revealed a frustrated expression. He didn't want to go to the chore house. The people there were too nosy, it would be too easy for his secret to be exposed. Also, there would be a lot of work that would disrupt his cultivation. But now, he couldn't not go. With a belly filled with anger, he packed his things and arrived at the chore house. After arriving there, he reached a decision in his heart. He couldn't stay in the chore house for too long. He had to mess up everything in the chore house so that every honorary disciple would go to the elders to ask for a replacement. With this idea in mind, Wang Lin cleaned up disciple Lu's room. Besides the bed and the table, everything that was useless was thrown outside. While he was doing this, a few disciples arrived at the chore house. They had learned that Wang Lin was now in charge of assigning chores, so many of them were nervous. The faces of the few that ridiculed Wang Lin the most were pale and their hearts pounded. Some had intentions of helping Wang Lin clean up, but after being glared at, they all obediently stood in the yard. After he finished cleaning, Wang Lin casually sat down on a chair. He coldly looked at the 100+ honorary disciples before him. He knew that the Heng Yue sect had a lot of honorary disciples. This was only a fraction of them. In the next few days, there would be more honorary disciples coming back to report on their work. "You will now chop 500 pounds of firewood." Wang Lin casually pointed at a person. He remembered that that person had secretly ridiculed him. That person was stunned. He immediately cried, "Brother Wang, I used to work in the kitchen. I don't know how to chop wood." Wang Lin rolled his eyes. He snorted, "Now it's 1,000 pounds a day." The boy suddenly kneeled to the ground and started crying. "Brother Wang, you are a good person. I shouldn't have ridiculed you back then. But please, don't be so vindictive. I can't possibly do 1,000 pounds. How about 500 pounds? The surrounding people all looked at each other. They all knew Wang Lin would make things difficult, but this was clearly revenge. There were a few honorary disciples in the crowd that shouted in discontent. "Everyone, don't listen to him. Let's go find an elder and have them carry out justice. Wang Lin is too overbearing." "Correct. Let us go find the elders to get another inner disciple to be in charge of this place. If they don't listen to us, we will kneel and never get up." "True. Let's go, everyone. Don't stay here. This Wang Lin has a villainous look. He doesn't even remember that he entered the sect by trying to commit suicide. Such a disgrace." The sound of dissatisfied voices grew louder and louder. Soon, everyone left the yard while shouting insults. They all had looks of grievance as they went toward the courtyard, all shouting things like, "Wang Lin doesn't want us to live anymore." Wang Lin was relaxed in his heart. He didn't stop them and hoped that they would succeed. This way, the elders would get mad and make someone else take over so he can concentrate on cultivation. The remaining 10 or so people were hesitating. They wanted to leave, but if this thing failed, wouldn't it mean that they had completely disrespected Wang Lin? Wang Lin wasn't in a rush. He waited for the result from the main courtyard. A moment later, all the honorary disciples gloomily came back, one by one. This time, they were no longer shouting, but had eyes filled with despair and silence. Wang Lin saw their expressions and knew that they had failed. He was very disappointed in his heart. It seemed he had to make an even bigger commotion. Thinking about it, he scanned the people here and said, "All of you who secretly mocked me, listen to me. I am here today to get revenge. If you're dissatisfied, go to the elders. If you can get me removed from this position, I will have to thank you." One of the disciples begged, "Brother Wang, you are a great person. Please forgive us." "Yes, Brother Wang, we were blind back then. Please give us a break. I'll kowtow to you. Brother Wang, they all mocked you back then, but I never did. I even defended you. Chapter 29, Locked Door. Without waiting for that person to finish, someone on the side angrily said, "Zhao Xiao, back then, you mocked him the loudest. Brother Wang, don't listen to him." Zhao Xiao's expression changed. He angrily said, "Zhao Xiao-san, I am your older brother, you backstabbing bastard. Go back to your room and see how I am going to beat you up. I'm loyal, Brother Wang. You're a kind person, please give me some easier work." "Brother Wang, don't listen to those two brothers. They are known for this two-man act. Who knows how many honorary disciples they cheated. Apprentice brother, I'm the person who has never said a bad thing about you." A very pretty female honorary disciple delicately said, "Brother Wang, this apprentice sister has always had a weak body and can't do any hard labor. How about I come and give you a massage every night? Is that okay?" Among the honorary disciples of the Heng Yue sect, there weren't many female disciples. Only about 10% were female. After all, in the test of perseverance, males had a better chance. The few female honorary disciples were, of course, well received by everyone. Based on their looks, some even got favored by inner disciples. Then, another female honorary disciple threw a pretty look at Wang Lin and flirtatiously said, "Apprentice brother, Brother Lu never gave me any hard work, I only ever came to serve him at night. I know a few other apprentice sisters. I'll take them to see you tonight, okay?" Everyone was desperately trying to tell Wang Lin that they had never said anything bad about him. After listening for a very long time, Wang Lin ran out of patience and shouted, "All of you, shut up. What a mess this is." After he finished speaking, he pointed at a person and said, "You, 20 vats of water. If you're unhappy, go to the elders." That person's body quivered. He opened his mouth to talk, but saw the impatience in Wang Lin's eyes. He immediately smiled and nodded his head. "You, wash 500 kilograms of clothes every day. Remember, if you're dissatisfied, go find the elders." The person who was pointed at swallowed hard and almost passed out. He muttered, 500 kilograms, that's like all the clothes in the sect added together. "You, clean the whole sect. Same thing, if you're dissatisfied, go find the elders. You, clear the outhouses. If I see one fly in there, you can living in there. You, go gather 500 pounds of herbs a day. If you mix weeds in there to trick me, I'll kick you out of the sect. All of you listen, if you're dissatisfied, go find the elders. For some, while the workload was hard, it was still bearable. However, for the last few he pointed at, their legs grew soft and immediately collapsed on the ground. All the honorary disciples wore pitiful expressions. The entire Heng Yue sect might not even have 500 kilograms of herbs in the mountains. Based on Wang Lin's memories of the people that had mocked him, he pointed at them one by one and carefully thought about what jobs to give them. He wasn't tired at all and finally finished assigning all the work. He lounged around for a while and thought that the chores that he assigned were impossible to finish. What could the honorary disciples do other than go complain to the elders? But just in case the elders decided not to do anything, it'd be better to make this mess even bigger, to let them know that it was a big mistake to make me, Wang Lin, in charge of the chore house. Thinking about it, he pointed at a person he didn't know and said, "You're in luck. Your job is to keep track of everything. Make a list of all the gifts given to me. Record their names and time of gift. If you try to be greedy, I'll kick you out of the sect." That person was so surprised he immediately fell to the ground and kowtowed to Wang Lin. He repeatedly said that he would remember to do it correctly and not make a mistake. All the honorary disciples were dumbfounded. Before, Disciple Lu was secretive about it, but this Wang Lin was boldly asking for bribes. A moment later, an honorary disciple stepped forward and took out 3 talismans used for visiting home. He presented them to Wang Lin and said, "Brother Wang, this is me paying my respects to you." Wang Lin replied with a sound. He put the talismans away and asked, "What job were you assigned earlier?" "Gather 20 vats of water a day." The person nervously replied. Wang Lin slowly said, "Then, do 5 vats a day instead." That person was surprised and immediately expressed his thanks. Following that person's lead, everyone else got up and were about to step forward when Wang Lin slowly stood up and said, "All of you leave. You all need to follow the proper process of giving gifts. Write down your current job and your desired job on a piece of paper, then send it to the person I appointed to manage this. You can only do it once in 10 days. After he finished, he went back into his room and closed the door. The people in the yard were sighing. Some even had anger in their eyes. Their stomachs were full of curses directed at Wang Lin, but none of them said them out loud. They all dispersed with long faces. After they left, Wang Lin came out of the room and explored the entire chore house. He found a remote door to a storage room. The storage room was not large. After Wang Lin cleaned it up, although he was disappointed, this was the most secluded place here. He cleaned up to make some space, then locked the door and entered the dream space. Time flew by. Wang Lin had already been in charge of the chore house for 2 months. In those 2 months, besides assigning jobs to the honorary disciples for the first few days, the rest of the time he focused on his cultivation. As for the chores of the honorary disciples, he didn't care at all. If they didn't do their jobs, all he had to do was snort coldly and they would offer him gifts. Wang Lin was very annoyed during those 2 months. His cultivation was constantly getting interrupted by the honorary disciples. He didn't know what the other inner disciples and elders were thinking. He messed things up this much, but they still hadn't sent a replacement. Chapter 30, Wang Hao. Do I need to be even more unreasonable? To leave the chore house, Wang Lin was ready to go all out. He really wanted to see what the limits of the elders were. Privately, among the honorary disciples, besides the 2 words trash and shameless, he gained another title, the Black-Hearted King. Compared to Disciple Lu's nickname, Weasel, it was on a whole different level. After Wang Lin had practiced for a year in the dream space, the spiritual energy in his body had increased many folds. He had reached the limit of the first layer. No matter how much he cultivated, his spiritual energy no longer increased. Thus, one night, he started to try the chant to enter the second layer. After failing so many times, his hard work wasn't a waste as he finally broke into the second layer. The pores on his body were oozing black grease. After washing himself, Wang Lin looked at himself and saw that his eyes were like lightning, He looked very different from before. He rubbed his chin and thought, there is only the chance for the third layer left. If I go back to Sunday Zoo to ask for the chance for the later layers and he finds out I reached the second layer, he will definitely question me about how it happened. If I can't properly explain it, then it will bring me a lot of trouble. After thinking for a while, Wang Lin still couldn't think of a good idea. He couldn't help but frown. With a sigh, Wang Lin began to practice the attraction force technique. After this year's time of practice, Wang Lin could now succeed 10 out of 10 times. Since he reached his current degree, he decided to try it on something harder. He found a large rock in the chore house and began to practice. Another month had passed. What Wang Lin had done at the chore house caused all the honorary disciples to complain non-stop. It was winter time and the sect started to prepare for the yearly inner disciple competition. This year was the Hangyue sect's honorary disciple competition that happens every 10 years. If one ranked in the top 3, they would become an inner disciple. All the honorary disciples were polishing their fighting skills and secretly plotting. Therefore, things related to the chore house were delayed as everyone was too busy. Wang Lin was very disappointed that he was still in charge of the chore house. As for the inner disciple competition, he didn't plan to participate. If he had the time, why not spend it cultivating in the dream space instead? Today, it started to snow on the Hangyue mountain. From a distance, it seemed like a land of snow. Wang Lin wasn't cultivating, but stood quietly in the yard. The attraction force technique activated as if there was a giant hand moving around, pushing away all the snow so none would land on him. Looking toward where his home was, he remembered that his parents would have the stove burning to keep the house warm around this time of year. He would sit next to the stove reading. Dad would be on the side carving, and Mum would be storing pickled vegetables. Sometimes, he'd be tired from reading and sit next to his dad, watching him carve. When he was in high spirits, he would go and help his dad. There was a lot of joy between them. Wang Lin remembered that under his bed were some wooden tops. He would sometimes take them out and play with them on the ice with the neighborhood kids. Thinking about all this, Wang Lin took a deep breath. A cultivator needs to sever all mortal ties, and all these were thoughts that would disrupt cultivation. Wang Lin closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his mind was clear. He couldn't sever all his mortal connections, so he hid them deep in his heart. While he was reminiscing, his expression suddenly changed. He was now in the second layer of chi condensation and had awakened his ability of divine sense. All of this was described in the 3 layers of chi condensation book. With a scan of his divine sense, he noticed that Wang Hao was coming in his direction. A moment later, the door opened. Wang Hao walked in, wearing a leather cap and leather coat. He looked at Wang Lin, surprised, and said, "Brother Taizhu, aren't you cold? Wearing this little and still standing outside?" Wang Lin chuckled, "I calculated that you would come and see me, so I came out to welcome you, you little rascal." He didn't feel cold at all. After reaching the second layer of chi condensation, he noticed that his body was a lot stronger than before. Wang Hao chuckled. He walked in and carefully looked at Wang Lin and said, "Brother Taizhu, how come I feel you're a bit different from a few months ago?" Wang Lin said, "That's natural. I have reached the second layer of chi condensation and can be considered an immortal." Wang Hao's mouth twitched. He went into the room and said, "Don't boast. Our talents are at about the same level. I have received help from immortal pills and still haven't reached the first layer. But for you to reach the second layer? Impossible." Wang Lin didn't try to clarify. Sometimes, when he told the truth, people wouldn't even believe him, and if he lied, then he might end up causing others to be suspicious. In the end, his relationship with Wang Hao wasn't deep. Better to be on guard. To trust someone at first sight was not something that Wang Lin was capable of. "Wang Hao, how come you have time to visit me today? Is the pill house not busy?" Wang Lin returned to the room and poured Wang Hao a cup of hot water. Wang Hao took the hot water and blew it a few times before taking a sip. He smiled. "You haven't gone to the pill house to pick up your things in the past few months. I've been saving your portion, and came to deliver it to you today." As he was talking, he took out a small package and put it on the table. Wang Lin revealed a faint smile. He didn't even look at the package, but looked at Wang Hao. He didn't believe Wang Hao only came to deliver a package. Wang Hao was embarrassed after being stared at and said, "Taizhu, I heard you've been doing pretty well at the chore house these past few months." Wang Lin poured himself some water. He took a sip and said, "Wang Hao, just say what you need to say. If I can help, I definitely will." Wang Hao's expression was awkward. He moved closer and mysteriously said, "Brother Taizhu, I always knew you were a smart person. Speaking honestly, I know you have a lot of the talisman the honorary disciples use to visit home. Can you lend me some?"